The white marble of the Lunar Sanctum was cold, but the hatred in the air was scorching. Queen Isadora Moon, the true eclipse priestess of the sanctum, stood bound to the executioner's pillar. Just 24 hours ago, she had been the revered ruler of this temple, the living bridge between the wolves and the moon. Now, her sacred white ceremonial gown was torn at the shoulders, stained with the dust of the dungeon. Thick, rough ropes bit into her slender wrists, drawing thin lines of blood that she refused to acknowledge. Below her, the courtyard was a sea of snarling faces. "Heretic!" someone screamed from the crowd. "False vessel! Burn the witch!" Another voice joined in, the sound echoing off the towering ancient pillars. Isadora did not flinch. She did not lower her head. Her ice-silver eyes looked past the furious mob, past the jeering guards, fixing entirely on the sacred altar at the center of the temple. Her breath was slow, measured. Her body was bruised, but her dignity remained an unbreakable fortress. She had been betrayed in the dead of night by High Priest Malachor and her own half-sister Vivian, framed with a forged prophecy that painted her as a curse upon the pack. She had lost her crown, her freedom, and her pack overnight. But she would not give them her tears. High above the rabble, seated on the gilded balcony reserved for foreign royalty, sat King Lucian Vanguard. The Alpha King of the Sunspear Dominion was a man carved from golden authority. He wore his heavy velvet cloak and ceremonial armor with the effortless grace of a conqueror. He had traveled across the continent to witness the coronation of the new White Queen, a diplomatic necessity to secure the eastern borders. But right now, Lucian was not thinking about diplomacy. He was trying to breathe. A suffocating primal tension coiled tightly in his chest. His inner wolf, a massive golden beast known for its terrifying dominance, was pacing wildly against the cage of his ribs. It was whining, a desperate, agonizing sound that Lucian had never experienced in his 34 years of life. The golden alpha gripped the marble armrest of his seat, his striking amber eyes narrowing as he scanned the massive temple. "What is this?" he thought, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. It wasn't the scent of the incense. It wasn't the metallic tang of the armored guards. It was a faint, nearly imperceptible scent cutting through the suffocating heat of the crowd. Night-blooming jasmine. And the sharp electric scent of ozone right before a devastating storm. Lucian's gaze dropped to the execution pillar. It fell upon the bound woman in the torn white dress. The moment his eyes locked onto Isadora, his breath hitched. The air vanished from his lungs. A phantom pain slashed across his own wrists, perfectly mirroring the places where the rough ropes dug into her pale skin. Mate. The word exploded in his mind, not as a whisper, but as a sovereign command from his beast. His golden wolf didn't just recognize her, it submitted. The ancient, conquering spirit within him threw itself down, howling in grief and absolute rage at the sight of her in chains. Lucian's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his breastplate. He forced himself to remain still, masking the violent storm behind a facade of royal indifference. He was a king of law. He could not slaughter a sovereign temple's court based on a scent. But as he watched a single drop of blood slide down Isadora's wrist, a low, guttural growl vibrated in the back of his throat. Down on the main dais, the grand doors of the inner sanctum opened. High Priest Malachor emerged, draped in heavy silver robes, his face twisted in a mask of manufactured piety. Beside him walked Vivian. The false queen was a vision of stolen glory, draped in shimmering silk and diamonds, her head held artificially high. She walked toward the center altar, soaking in the cheers of the deceived pack. But Vivian did not go to the altar first. She stopped, turning her steps toward the execution pillar where Isadora was bound. Vivian stepped close, leaning in so only Isadora could hear.
"Look at them,"
Vivian whispered, a cruel, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "They worship me, and you are nothing but dirt beneath my slippers. When the moon reaches its peak, you will burn, Isadora, and I will take the eclipse dagger." Isadora's silver eyes slowly shifted, meeting her sister's gaze. There was no fear in them, only a chilling, ancient stillness that made Vivian subconsciously take a half step back. "A thief may wear the silk, Vivian," Isadora said, her voice soft, melodic, yet carrying the crushing weight of the deep ocean. "But the throne knows its own blood. Touch the dagger, if you dare." Vivian's face flushed with fury. She raised her hand to strike the bound woman across the face. Up on the balcony, the sound of shattering stone echoed sharply over the murmur of the crowd. Lucian Vanguard stood up. The thick marble armrest of his chair had crumbled to dust under his grip. "Hi." His amber eyes were locked on Vivian's raised hand, burning with a lethal, unrestrained hellfire. The sharp, deafening crack of shattering marble echoed through the massive temple. Silence instantly fell over the courtyard. Thousands of eyes, including Vivienne's, darted up to the gilded balcony. King Lucian Vanguard stood there, his tall, imposing frame casting a long shadow over the proceedings. Dust cascaded from his clenched fist, where the solid armrest had been reduced to powder. His amber eyes, glowing with a smoldering, dangerous light, were fixed entirely on Vivian's raised hand. He didn't speak a single word. He didn't have to. The sheer weight of his alpha aura pressed down on the sanctum like a suffocating blanket, sending a clear, unspoken warning. Strike her, and you will not leave this temple alive. Vivian's breath caught in her throat. Her hand trembled in midair. The terrifying, ancient power radiating from the Sunspear King made her inner wolf whimper and tuck its tail. Slowly, awkwardly, she lowered her hand, smoothing out her stolen silk skirts to hide her sudden panic. High Priest Malachor, sensing the precarious shift in the atmosphere, quickly stepped forward. He cleared his throat, raising a golden staff to draw the crowd's attention back to him. "People of the Lunar Sanctum," Malachor projected, his voice booming with practiced authority. "We are gathered today to witness the dawn of a new era. For too long, the sanctum has been corrupted by a false vessel. Isadora Moon has conspired with dark forces, hoarding the temple's grace for her own selfish desires." A collective murmur of outrage rippled through the deceived pack. Isadora closed her eyes for a brief moment. The lies were a bitter poison, but she refused to swallow them. She opened her eyes, her silver gaze steady and unyielding. She did not struggle against the heavy ropes. A queen did not behave like captured prey. "But the goddess has not abandoned us," Malachor continued, gesturing grandly toward Vivian. "She has revealed the true White Queen. Vivian, step forward and claim the eclipse dagger. Let the Moonstone altar recognize its rightful master." The crowd erupted into cheers. Vivian, recovering her arrogance, lifted her chin and approached the sacred altar at the center of the temple. Resting on a cushion of black velvet was the eclipse dagger. Its blade was forged from fallen stars, the hilt wrapped in silver wire and ancient runes. For centuries, only the true White Queen could lift it from the Moonstone. Vivian reached out, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. Her fingers brushed the silver hilt. Instantly, a sharp, invisible shockwave violently repelled her hand. Vivian gasped, stumbling backward. Her heel caught on the marble steps, and she nearly fell to the floor, her face draining of all color. A faint, low hum resonated from the Moonstone, a sound of absolute rejection. A confused whisper swept through the front rows of the crowd. Malicor's eyes widened in brief panic. He rushed to Vivian's side, grabbing her arm under the guise of steadying her. "The power of the dagger is immense, my queen," he announced loudly, his voice strained. "You must recite the sacred vows of purification before the stone will yield to your touch." Vivian nodded frantically, rubbing her numb fingers. "Yes, the vows. I must prepare." Tied to the execution pillar, Isadora watched the pathetic display. A soft, tragic sigh escaped her lips. "You cannot trick the stone, Malicor," she murmured, her voice barely carrying over the wind, yet ringing with undeniable truth. "It knows the blood of a liar." Up on the balcony, Lucian watched the entire exchange with cold, calculating precision. His golden wolf sneered in disgust at Vivian. "False," the beast snarled in his mind. "Fake crown, fake queen." Then the wolf's attention snapped back to the bound woman. The pull was intoxicating, an invisible tether wrapping around Lucian's heart and dragging him toward her. He could smell her pristine scent beneath the dust and fear of the temple. He saw the way she held her head, the quiet, devastating power in her silver eyes. She was a sovereign chained among cowards. Down in the courtyard, Malicor realized he was losing control of the narrative. The crowd was growing restless, murmuring about the dagger's rejection. He needed a distraction. He needed blood. "Look at the heretic," Malicor shouted, pointing a condemning finger at Isadora. "Even now she whispers dark curses against your new queen. Will you let her taint this sacred ground?" The fear and confusion in the crowd rapidly twisted back into blind fury. "Traitor!" a man yelled from the mob. Someone picked up a jagged piece of loose cobblestone and hurled it toward the pillar. It flew through the air and struck Isadora near her temple. Isadora's head snapped to the side. A thin, bright line of crimson blood trailed down her pale cheek. She let out a sharp breath, her eyes fluttering for a fraction of a second, but she forced them open. She locked eyes with Malicor, offering him nothing but absolute, crushing pity. But up on the balcony, that single drop of blood severed the last chain of Lucian's restraint. Roar, primal and earth-shattering, tore from the Alpha King's throat. It was a sound that stopped hearts, a sound that promised absolute destruction. Lucian Vanguard did not take the stairs. He threw his heavy velvet cloak aside and vaulted directly over the marble railing, dropping down into the center of the hostile courtyard. The impact of Lucian Vanguard's landing shook the very foundations of the Lunar Sanctum. He did not crash into the marble like a beast. He landed with the terrifying, flawless precision of a warlord. Yet the stone, beneath his heavy, iron-heeled boots, fractured in a spiderweb pattern, unable to contain the sheer, explosive force of his descent. Dust plumed into the air, swirling around his massive frame as he slowly stood up to his full height. The courtyard, just seconds ago a boiling cauldron of hatred, was plunged into a suffocating, absolute silence. The alpha aura radiating from the Sunspear King was not merely intimidating. It was a physical weight. It smelled of scorched earth, molten gold, and absolute authority. The rioting crowd gasped, stepping back in unison as if shoved by an invisible hand. Near the execution pillar, a heavily robed executioner had been stepping forward, a lit torch in his hand to ignite the dry wood stacked beneath Isadora. Lucian turned his head. His striking amber eyes locked onto the executioner. Lucian did not draw his sword. He did not issue a threat. He simply let the ancient, dominating power of the golden lichen crash over the man. The executioner's hands began to violently tremble. The torch slipped from his grasp, clattering harmlessly onto the stone. Unable to bear the crushing pressure of the Alpha King's gaze, the executioner's knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, pressing his forehead against the cold marble in total, involuntary submission. Lucian turned away from the trembling man, his heavy boots echoing like war drums in the dead silence of the temple as he closed the final distance to the pillar. He stopped mere inches from Isadora. Up close, the scent of night-blooming jasmine and storm-charged ozone was absolutely intoxicating. His inner wolf, a creature that had conquered armies, dropped its head in absolute reverence the moment it was in her shadow. Lucian's eyes scanned the torn white silk of her dress, the cruel ropes biting into her wrists, and finally, the thin trail of crimson blood drying on her pale temple. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to tear the chains apart, to wrap her in his cloak, and to burn the sanctum to the ground for daring to bruise her. His jaw locked so tightly his teeth ground together. He was fighting the hardest battle of his life just to keep his hands at his sides. Isadora slowly raised her head. Her ice-silver eyes met his burning amber gaze. She did not look at him with the desperation of a rescued maiden. She looked at him with the calm, quiet authority of a sovereign queen holding court in a ruin. "Sunspear King," Isadora spoke, her voice a soft, melodic breeze that somehow cut through the heavy tension. "This is not your dominion. You risk a war by standing here." Lucian felt a strange, thrilling jolt in his chest at her words. She is chained, bleeding and facing the pyre, he thought. Yet she is the one warning me. "And yet I am here," Lucian rumbled, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated deep within the chest of every wolf in the courtyard. He turned his broad back to her, deliberately positioning his massive frame between Isadora and the rest of the temple. It was the ultimate stance of protection, a silent declaration that to reach the bound woman, they would have to go through the golden lichen first. "King Vanguard!" High Priest Malicor's voice cracked as he scrambled down the altar steps, his golden staff shaking in his grip. "What is the meaning of this? You interrupt a sacred cleansing." "This is an internal matter of the Lunar Sanctum." Lucian's eyes shifted, locking onto the High Priest with predatory coldness. "I interrupt a farce, Malicor. You invite the King of Sunspear to witness the coronation of a white queen. Yet you present me with a petty mob throwing rocks at a bound woman. I do not tolerate insults to my intelligence." Vivian, recovering a sliver of her stolen arrogance, stepped up beside Malicor. She adjusted her silk shawl, trying to project royal authority. "She is a heretic and a traitor, King Lucian. The prophecy decrees she must burn before the moon peaks. You must step aside." Lucian's gaze slid to Vivian. "Silence." The single word was delivered with such devastating, absolute command that Vivian physically flinched. The breath was stolen from her lungs, and she snapped her mouth shut, her face flushing with humiliated terror. "You speak of prophecies and sacred laws," Lucian continued, his voice echoing off the high arches of the temple. I am well versed in the ancient laws of this sanctum, High Priest. More so than you, it seems. If you claim this woman in silk is the true vessel, and the woman in chains is a liar, then a mob is not the answer. Malachor swallowed hard, a bead of cold sweat rolling down his temple. The sanctum has spoken, King Vanguard. The sanctum has been manipulated, Lucian countered smoothly, a dangerous smirk touching his lips. If you are so certain of your truth, Malachor, then let the stone decide. I invoke the trial of the Moonstone. A collective gasp swept through the priests standing near the altar. Malachor's face drained of color. That is an archaic rite. It has not been invoked in centuries. It is too dangerous. It is the law, Lucian stated, his voice a blade of cold steel. Unbind her. Bring her to the altar. Let her blood touch the stone. If it rejects her, I will ride back to Sunspear and leave you to your fire. But if you deny this trial, Lucian's eyes flared with pure, lethal gold. I will consider it a confession of treason against the goddess, and my armies will level this temple to the dust. The threat of war hung in the stifling air of the temple, heavy and suffocating. High Priest Malachor's face turned an ashen, sickly gray. The Sunspear Dominion possessed the most fearsome military force on the continent. To deny King Lucian's demand meant bringing the wrath of 50,000 armored lichens down upon their white marble steps. But to allow the trial of the Moonstone meant his own meticulously constructed web of lies would unravel in front of the entire pack. Her blood is tainted, Malachor stammered, his voice lacking its previous booming confidence. He looked desperately toward the crowd, trying to rally their blind faith. To let a heretic bleed upon the sacred altar is a desecration. The goddess will punish us all for such blasphemy. If her blood is truly tainted, the stone will burn her to ash, Lucian replied, his tone chillingly calm, completely devoid of mercy. That is the ancient covenant, is it not? Or have you rewritten the sacred texts to suit your own cowardice, High Priest? A shift occurred in the courtyard. The crowd, previously a unified mob of hatred, began to fracture. Whispers of doubt rippled through the ranks. The Alpha King's unwavering certainty was a mirror reflecting Malachor's sudden, glaring panic. If Isadora was truly a false vessel, why was the High Priest so terrified of the stone's judgment? Seeing Malachor paralyzed by his own trap, Lucian turned his back to the altar. He faced the execution pillar and the woman bound to it. The transition in the golden lichen was profound. The lethal, oppressive aura that had held the entire sanctum hostage retracted, narrowing down until it wrapped entirely around Isadora. He stepped onto the wooden pyre. Up close, the damage inflicted upon her was stark. The harsh ropes had bitten deeply into her pale skin. Lucian reached out. His massive hands, encased in gold-inlaid gauntlets, grasped the thick hemp ropes binding her wrists. He did not ask for a knife. With a sharp, controlled flex of his broad shoulders, he snapped the thick bindings as if they were made of brittle, dried grass. Isadora's arms fell to her sides. She swayed slightly, her bare feet adjusting to the uneven wood of the pyre. Lucian's hands hovered for a fraction of a second, fighting the agonizing instinct to catch her, to pull her against his chest and bury his face in her silver-white hair. He unclasped the heavy velvet cloak from his shoulders, holding the rich fabric out to her. It was a silent offering to cover her torn, dirt-stained ceremonial dress, a shield to restore her modesty before the staring eyes of her betrayers. Isadora looked at the cloak, then up into his striking amber eyes. Keep your cloak, King Vanguard. Isadora said quietly, her voice steady. A queen does not hide the scars her people gave her. Let them look upon what they have done. Lucian felt his breath catch. His wolf bowed its head again, deeply humbled by her quiet, ironclad resilience. He slowly lowered the cloak, stepping aside to clear her path to the altar. Isadora stepped down from the pyre, her ba where feet met the cold marble floor of the courtyard. The moment she moved, the heavy clouds above the temple's grand oculus parted, allowing a brilliant shaft of pure moonlight to spill directly into the sanctum. The silver light cascaded over Isadora's slender frame. As the moonlight kissed her skin, a faint, ethereal glow began to emanate from her left collarbone, just visible above the torn neckline of her dress. It was a crescent moon, intricate and glowing with a luminescent silver light, the hidden birthright of the true eclipse priestess, reacting to the proximity of the sacred stone. Vivienne saw the glow. The false queen let out a strangled gasp, backing away from the altar, her hands flying to her mouth. Malachor saw it too. Total, unhinged desperation shattered his facade. If she reached the altar, he was a dead man. "It is dark magic!" Malachor shrieked, pointing his golden staff at Isadora. "She weaves illusions to deceive the foreign king. Paladins, defend the sanctum. Strike the witch down before she corrupts the altar." For a second, the courtyard froze in shock. Then, loyalty to the high priest overrode common sense for a dozen corrupt temple guards. They drew their silver glaives, the heavy blades ringing sharply in the tense air. They moved in a synchronized rush, forming a barricade of lethal steel between Isadora and the Moonstone. Lucian's eyes flashed a pure, predatory gold. A low, vibrating snarl tore from his throat. In a blur of motion, the Alpha King placed himself directly in front of Isadora. He did not draw his sword. He didn't need to. His muscles coiled under his armor, ready to tear the paladins apart with his bare hands. He was fully prepared to break his promise, to let his wolf off its chain and flood the white marble with the blood of anyone who dared raise a blade against his mate. But before Lucian could strike, a soft, cool hand gently grasped his armored forearm. The touch was feather light, yet it hit Lucian with the force of a lightning strike. The raging inferno in his veins instantly cooled. The golden lichen halted, freezing in place as Isadora stepped up beside him. "Do not shed blood on my sacred ground, Lucian," Isadora commanded softly. It was the first time she had used his name. The sound of it, spoken with such quiet authority, anchored his soul completely to hers. "They mean to kill you," Lucian ground out, his jaw tight, his eyes still locked on the advancing paladins. "They mean to hide the truth," Isadora corrected, dropping her hand from his arm. She looked up at him, her silver eyes holding a profound, ancient wisdom. "I do not need a sword to defeat them. I only need a witness. Step back, my king." Lucian stared at her, the mate bond humming with a fierce, protective ache. Yet he saw the unyielding sovereignty in her posture. She was not a damsel needing rescue from the swords. Shh. She was the rightful ruler of this domain, stepping forward to reclaim her throne. Slowly, deliberately, the Alpha King stepped aside.
Take this.
Thank you.
Take this.
Thank you. I cannot accept this. It is not my path. I cannot accept this. It is not my path.
Isadora Moon turned away from him, her silver hair flowing down her back. Unarmed, wearing a torn, blood-stained dress, she walked directly toward the wall of silver blades and the desperate, cornered traitors waiting at the altar. The 12 paladins of the Lunar Sanctum held their silver glaives steady, forming an impenetrable wall of lethal steel between the disgraced queen and the sacred altar. Under normal circumstances, these elite warriors were the immovable shield of the temple, bound by ancient oaths to protect the sanctum's purity. But as Isadora Moon walked toward them, her bare feet silent against the cold marble, the heavy blades in their hands began to waver. She did not carry a weapon. She wore the torn, dirt-stained remnants of a ceremonial gown. Yet with every step she took, the silver crescent moon tattooed upon her collarbone pulsed with a blinding, ethereal light. The air around her grew dense, humming with the terrifying, static charge of an approaching thunderstorm. Lucian Vanguard stood a few paces behind her, a silent, looming mountain of golden authority. His fists were still tightly clenched, his armored muscles coiled like a trap, ready to spring. He had yielded to her command, but his golden eyes tracked every microscopic twitch of the paladin's weapons. Let them try, his inner wolf snarled. He would cross the distance in a fraction of a heartbeat. No blade would ever touch her skin again. "Hold your ground," High Priest Malachor shrieked from the altar, his voice cracking with pure panic as he saw the hesitation in his guards. "She is a witch! Strike her down! That is a direct order from your High Priest." The captain of the paladins swallowed hard, his eyes darting nervously between the approaching woman and the furious High Priest. He gripped his glaive tighter and took a step forward, lowering the razor-sharp tip toward Isadora's chest. "Halt, Isadora," the captain ordered, though his voice lacked conviction. "One more step, and I will be forced to strike." Isadora did not stop. She did not even slow her pace. "You swore an oath, Captain," Isadora said, her voice echoing through the silent, breathless courtyard. It was not a shout, but the serene, crushing weight of a true sovereign. "You swore to defend the light of the moon, not the ambitions of a corrupt man. Do you truly believe the goddess would allow a heretic to walk this path unburned?" The captain's breath hitched. Isadora was now close enough that the tip of his silver glaive hovered mere inches from her glowing collarbone. "Strike her!" Malachor howled. Realizing the guards were paralyzed by her divine aura, the High Priest raised his golden staff. his face contorted into a mask of ugly, desperate malice. He began to chant rapidly in a forgotten, forbidden tongue. A sudden, unnatural shadow bled from the base of his staff, slithering across the white marble like a nest of vipers, racing directly toward Isadora. Up on the balcony and in the crowd, murmurs of horror erupted. The high priest was using blood magic, a practice strictly forbidden within the temple walls. Lucian's jaw locked. His boot shifted on the stone, preparing to launch himself forward to intercept the dark magic. But Isadora was faster.
Step back.
She did not flinch as the serpentine shadows darted toward her feet. Instead, she closed her eyes for a fraction of a second and inhaled. When her silver eyes snapped open, the crescent mark on her chest erupted in a blinding flash of pure, incandescent white light. The wave of lunar energy swept across the floor in a perfect circle. The moment the dark, slithering magic collided with her light, it evaporated into harmless gray smoke with a sharp, agonizing hiss. Malachor Street tumbled backward, dropping his staff as a severe shockwave of rebounding magic hit his chest. He gasped for air, his dark spell utterly shattered by the overwhelming purity of the White Queen's bloodline. The paladins, standing closest to the blast of silver light, suddenly cried out. The silver glaives in their hands, weapons forged to serve the temple, rapidly began to heat up. The metal glowed with a searing divine warmth that burned through their leather gauntlets. It was not a fire that consumed, but a holy rejection. The weapons were refusing to be raised against their true master. One by one, the guards dropped their glaives. The heavy weapons clattered loudly against the marble. Stripped of their arms and crushed by the sudden suffocating pressure of Isadora's royal aura, the paladin's knees buckled. The captain was the first to fall. He collapsed onto the floor, bowing his head deeply, his armor scraping against the stone in absolute, unquestioning submission. The remaining 11 warriors immediately followed, kneeling in a perfect, parted line, creating a clear, unobstructed path to the altar. The crowd watched in stunned, terrified silence. The executioner had bowed to the foreign Alpha, but the Sanctum's own elite guard had just bowed to the woman they had condemned to burn. Lucian felt a fierce, terrifying pride swell in his chest. His mate was a force of nature. She was tearing down an entire corrupt regime with nothing but the truth of her blood. He aimed where he was, standing guard over her back, his golden eyes sweeping the crowd to ensure no one dared to interfere with her ascension. Isadora walked past the kneeling guards without a second glance. She ascended the 3 marble steps leading to the sacred Moonstone altar. Vivian, the false queen, was backed into the far corner of the dais, her silk skirts tangled around her trembling legs. She looked at Isadora not with anger, but with the raw, primal terror of a thief caught by a god.
No,
Vivian whimpered, shaking her head.
no, the prophecy. It chose me.
Isadora ignored her sister completely. Her silver gaze was fixed solely on the center of the altar, where the eclipse dagger rested upon its cushion of black velvet. The blade of fallen stars seemed to hum, vibrating in anticipation of her proximity. "Do not let her touch it," Malachor screamed from the floor, coughing violently as he tried to crawl toward the altar. "If she touches it, the sanctum falls. Stop her!" Isadora reached the altar. She raised her pale, bruised hand, the rope burns on her wrists fully visible in the moonlight. She held her hand directly over the silver hilt of the dagger, the air around her crackling with the immense, pent-up power of a broken bond ready to be remade. The heavy, suffocating silence in the Lunar Sanctum was broken only by the ragged, terrified breathing of the false queen. Isadora's bruised hand hovered over the lips dagger. She did not hesitate. Her long, elegant fingers wrapped firmly around the silver wire of the hilt. When Vivian had attempted to touch the ancient relic, it had violently repelled her. But the moment Isadora's skin made contact with the silver, the dagger let out a resonant, melodic hum. It was a sound of profound relief, like a lost key finally sliding into its rightful lock. The blade of fallen stars flared with a brilliant, blinding light, recognizing the pure blood of the true Eclipse Priestess. Isadora lifted the dagger smoothly from its velvet cushion. The weapon felt weightless in her grip, a perfect extension of her own soul. She turned the blade inward. With a steady, unflinching motion, she pressed the razor-sharp edge against the pad of her thumb. A single, perfect drop of crimson blood welled to the surface. Isadora extended her hand over the center of the Moonstone altar, allowing that single drop to fall. The moment her blood touched the ancient white marble, the world simply stopped. There was no deafening explosion. There was no fiery blast. Instead, a wave of absolute divine sovereignty pulsed outward from the altar, silent and infinitely heavy. It washed over the courtyard in a ring of pure, blinding silver light, expanding faster than the eye could track. When the light hit them, the wolves of the Lunar Sanctum did not just feel fear. They felt the undeniable, crushing weight of their own true goddess returning to her throne. 1. In the courtyard, the rioters who had screamed for her execution suddenly found they could not breathe. An invisible, insurmountable pressure pressed down on their shoulders. It was the absolute command of the White Queen's bloodline, an ancient law carved into the very DNA of their inner beasts. A man in the front row dropped to his knees, his hands planting flat on the marble floor. Beside him, a woman collapsed, bowing her head so deeply her forehead touched the stone. Then, like a falling wave, the rest of the sanctum followed. The sound was thunderous. Thousands of bodies simultaneously hitting the marble floor in utter, involuntary submission. The elite paladins, the lesser priests, the wealthy aristocrats, and the common pack members. Every single wolf in the massive temple was forced to the ground, their inner beasts whining in a mixture of profound shame and total reverence. They had mocked her. They had tied her to a pyre. They had thrown stones at her. And now, they could not even lift their eyes to look upon her glory. High Priest Malachor, still struggling on the stairs, was flattened against the marble by the invisible pressure. He gasped for air, his fingers clawing uselessly at the smooth stone. His golden staff rolled away from him, completely devoid of power. Vivian collapsed entirely. The false queen crumpled into a weeping, pathetic heap at the edge of the dais, the stolen silk of her gown pooling around her like a shroud. Her stolen authority had evaporated the second the true queen bled. Through the sea of thousands of kneeling wolves, only one man remained standing. King Lucian Vanguard stood his ground. The wave of silver light had washed over him, and for a fleeting second, the terrifying pressure had tried to force him down. But his alpha blood was ancient and absolute. He anchored his heavy boots to the fractured floor, his massive frame immovable against the tide of divine energy. Yet internally, something far more beautiful occurred. While Lucian's physical body remained standing, tall and protective, his inner golden lichen, the arrogant, warlike beast that had never bowed to anyone, willingly lowered its massive head, kneeling in the sanctuary of his soul. It was a submission not born of force, but of profound, eternal devotion. She was his mate. She was the moon to his sun. Lucian's amber eyes traced Isadora's silhouette. The torn, dirt-stained ceremonial dress no longer looked like the rags of a prisoner. Bathed in the silver light of the Moonstone, with the crescent mark glowing upon her collarbone, she looked like a deity who had descended into the mud just to prove she could not be dirtied by it. Isadora slowly turned away from the altar. The eclipse dagger was held loosely at her side, its starlight blade humming. She looked out over the massive, silent courtyard. Thousands of wolves were bowed before her, their heads pressed to the cold stone. The execution pillar behind her stood empty and irrelevant. The fire they had meant to burn her with was nothing compared to the light she wielded. Isadora's silver eyes swept over the kneeling masses, finally dropping to the two figures trembling at her feet. Vivienne was sobbing, her hands covering her face. Malachor was completely immobilized, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization that his entire life's work, his meticulously planned coup, had been undone in a single minute by a drop of blood. "You spoke of prophecies, Malachor," Isadora said, her voice soft, yet it carried flawlessly across the deafening silence of the kneeling kingdom. "You spoke of the goddess's will. Let us see what the goddess has to say about your crown, Vivienne." Isadora took a slow, deliberate step toward her sister. Isadora's bare feet made no sound against the cold marble as she closed the distance between the altar and her trembling sister. Vivienne shrank back, her heavily jeweled hands covering her face. The stolen silk of her gown looked suddenly ridiculous, like a child playing dress-up in a world of ancient gods. "Isadora, please!" Vivienne sobbed, her voice high and reeking of pathetic desperation. "I am your sister. We share the same father. You cannot kill me." Isadora stopped. She looked down at the weeping woman. There was no hatred in her ice-silver eyes, only a vast, empty ocean of pity. "A sister would not have built my pyre, Vivienne," Isadora said, her voice echoing softly over the kneeling masses. "A true queen would not need a mob to defend her right to rule. I am not going to kill you. Death is too brief a punishment for what you have done to this sanctum." Isadora slowly raised the eclipse dagger. The blade of starlight hummed, vibrating with the absolute truth of the Moonstone. She reached out and rested the flat of the silver blade gently against the diamond-encrusted crown sitting upon Vivienne's head. "The throne rejects you," Isadora commanded. The moment the sacred dagger touched the false crown, a sharp crack echoed through the air. The diamonds lost their luster in a fraction of a second. The heavy gold warped, turned brittle, and instantly crumbled into fine gray ash. It rained down over Vivienne's face and shoulders, leaving her with nothing but her own terrified tears. The stolen aura of royalty was violently stripped from her, leaving a hollow, powerless girl in its wake. Vivienne shrieked, clawing at her hair as if trying to catch the dust of her broken ambition, but it was gone forever. Isadora turned her gaze to High Priest Malachor. The old man was still flattened against the marble, gasping heavily. He had used the dark, forbidden blood magic to manipulate the sanctum, corrupting the temple's laws to feed his own greed. "And you, Malachor," Isadora's voice dropped, carrying the cold finality of winter. "You have poisoned the ears of my people and corrupted the sacred rites. You are no longer High Priest. You are no longer a wolf of the Lunar Sanctum." She pointed the tip of the dagger toward him. A brilliant flash of silver light shot from the Moonstone altar, striking the high priest square in the chest. Malachor screamed, his back arching off the floor. But there was no blood. The divine light simply reached into his core and shattered the dark vessel of his magic. The black veins that had crept up his neck during his spellcasting rapidly faded. His body seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds, his muscles withering as the stolen vitality was ripped away. He collapsed back onto the stone, a frail, powerless old man, weeping for the magic he would never wield again. "Take them to the outer borders," Isadora commanded, looking toward the captain of the paladins, who was still kneeling respectfully. "They are exiled from the sanctum, stripped of their names and their wolves. Let them walk the barren lands with nothing but the memory of the light they tried to steal." "Yes, my queen," the captain answered immediately, his voice thick with profound reverence and deep shame. He signaled the other guards, who quickly rose, keeping their heads bowed, and dragged the weeping Vivian and the broken Malachor out of the courtyard. The sanctum was silent once more. The threat was gone. The truth was absolute. Isadora stood alone at the center of the dais, the silver crescent moon on her collarbone glowing softly in the moonlight. She was exhausted. Her wrists burned from the harsh ropes, and her body ached from the brutal captivity. Yet she remained perfectly upright, carrying the crushing weight of the crown she had just restored. Then, the heavy rhythmic sound of armored boots against the marble broke the silence. King Lucian Vanguard walked through the sea of kneeling wolves. The crowd parted instinctively, giving the towering golden lichen a wide berth. His velvet cloak flared behind him, his amber eyes burning with an intensity that could melt iron. He ascended the steps of the dais. He did not stop until he was standing just inches away from Isadora. The contrast between them was breathtaking. The Alpha King, clad in pristine, gold-inlaid armor, radiating raw, conquering power. And the White Queen, barefoot, dressed in torn and dirtied silk, radiating an untouchable, divine sovereignty. Lucian looked down at her. His inner wolf, the fearsome beast that had brought kingdoms to their knees, was completely silent, basking in the overwhelming peace of her presence. He slowly raised his hands, unbuckling the heavy golden gauntlets from his forearms. He let the metal drop heavily to the floor, leaving his hands bare. With excruciating gentleness, Lucian reached out. He did not grab her waist or claim her with the arrogance of a ruler. Instead, he took her bruised, rope-burned hands in his large, warm palms. Isadora looked up, her silver eyes meeting his amber gaze. For the first time all night, the cold, regal shield around her heart fluttered. She saw the violent storm of protection and absolute devotion swirling in his eyes. "You did not need my sword," Lucian murmured, his deep voice meant only for her. "You broke them with nothing but the truth." "I needed a witness, Lucian," Isadora replied softly, a faint, genuine smile finally touching her lips. "And you stood between me and the blades when no one else would." Lucian's jaw tightened with emotion. He slowly sank to one knee on the white marble. A collective gasp swept through the thousands of wolves still bowed in the courtyard. The Alpha King of Sunspear, the most feared conqueror in the known world, was kneeling before the White Queen. Lucian brought Isadora's bruised hands to his lips, pressing a tender, lingering kiss against the red marks the ropes had left behind. "I came to this temple to secure a border," Lucian declared, his voice rising, deep and resonant, echoing off the ancient pillars so every wolf in the sanctum would hear his vow. "I found something far greater. You are the light of the Lunar Sanctum, Isadora Moon. But You are also my mate.
You leave me
And the
no
Sunspear
choice.
dominion will burn to ash before
I do
anyone
this
dares to
without
touch you
hatred,
again.
only pity.
Isadora's breath caught as the
I
mate bond finally
understand.
settled into place, a warm, golden tether anchoring her soul to his. The terrifying, lonely cold of her betrayal was instantly swept away by the fierce, protective heat of his devotion. She gently squeezed his hands, silently accepting his vow. The silver wolf and the golden lichen were bound. The false crown had fallen, and the true queen had risen from the ashes, holding a kingdom that no lie could ever break. A crown can be stolen, but a true bond cannot be buried forever. Do you think Isadora was right to exile her sister, rather than take her life after such a brutal betrayal? If you love emotional Alpha King stories about rejected mates, hidden truths, and queens who rise from pain to claim their rightful place, subscribe and come back for our next epic romance.
You are no longer worthy. I will not yield, then face judgment.
No! Please, no!
We understand, Your Majesty.
This cannot be happening.
We must move on.
No! Please, no!
We understand, Your Majesty.
This cannot be happening.
We must move on.
I pledge my sword and my heart to you, my queen.
Rise, my loyal knight.
I pledge my sword and my heart